I have a different plan in mind. But when I say the word plan, that makes it sound optional, which is not the impression you should be taking away. This game ends now. You want Cyril in your life, you will think before you speak. I'll make sure he visits twice a month. I'll make sure that he calls you. I will guarantee a level of engagement, but it will be inversely proportional to the volume of anxiety you generate in our lives.
I don't know.
I'm not done.
Well, hello there, Star Wars fans, and welcome to our final episode of Road to Rebellion, the official ATG Andor Aftershow. I am Pete Fletzer.
And I am Nick Mielke, and we thank you for hanging out with us here all throughout the season of Road to Rebellion on Around the Galaxy, which is a part of the SSW Network.
And Andor ended a few weeks ago, but honestly, it remains one of the most talked about Star Wars properties that I can think of in years.
It really has. And we know that you, the listener, have a lot of questions. You have comments, you have ideas about the show. So we decided the best way to wrap this all up is to open up a channel in the HoloNet so that we can hear directly from you.
That's right. We figured there was no better way to end our in-depth look at Andor Season 2 than by taking your calls and questions.
We are going to take every one of those calls and questions that we received. And before we do, I've done this every week on Road to Rebellion. We want to warn you, this is a full spoiler show. Everything in Andor, Season 1, Season 2, Rogue One, anything else in the Star Wars galaxy that may pop up as a part of your question. So if you haven't caught up yet, hit pause, come back when you're ready. We will be here ready for you to hear all the things that we're going to talk about.
We absolutely will. We wouldn't want to do it without you, because each week on Road to Rebellion, Nick and I have unpacked the story, the characters, the big moments, the little details, and everything in between. But this week, we turn the key points of discussion over to you.
That is right. And we're going to get things started. We're going to kick it off right now. Our first caller is from good friend of the show, Mr. Jeff Quaglio.
Pete, Nick, it's Jeff. Okay, I know I'm leaving this message late. It's been a crazy week. So my main point about Andor, what a show, what a season. It was the most intense. I remember a Star Wars show being in, I mean, really since Mando, Season 2, towards the end, when did it stir emotion like that. I mean, it was fantastic, I thought. But here's what I wanted to focus on that should be commended, I think, is the performances of the actors. The performances in this show were second to none. And I think that's what is lacking on a lot of these other shows, is the acting isn't that good outside of a handful of actors that performed well. But overall, the talent has not been good, I don't think. And I think that's where other shows have suffered. But the 2 seasons of Andor, the casting and the performances were spot on. They nailed every frickin' one of them. Even Mon Mothma's husband, that prick. But everybody hated that guy. Anyway, keep it up. I'll catch it in the rerun. Love you guys.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for leaving that message. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate you being a fan. You know, Nick, he mentioned mostly how amazing the acting performances were in this, and he does say something which is an interesting thought, and let's hit on that first. And that is, he said, compared to some of the other Star Wars shows. And I think the first thing that's really important is you can like one show and still like other shows. So I don't think it's necessarily, and knowing Jeff, I know it wasn't intended in that regard, but
right.
You know, you and I said from day one that Carl Weathers was over the top in Mando, but that was kind of his job. So he did kind of play it the right way. What are your thoughts on kind of the way the acting in Mando, or not Mando, in Andor versus the broader Star Wars universe at this point?
I think it's a really interesting point. And I think, as we know with pretty much everything that's out there, art is subjective. And what I may think or deem over the top or a fantastic performance is going to be completely different than what somebody else may deem as over the top or too much acting or whatever it might be.
Right.
I do think there's a difference in the styles of the show. And we've talked a little bit about this before. I think something like Ahsoka and Mandalorian to a strong degree has almost an animation feel to it. It's live action animation. It's more colorful. It's a little cartoony, even though it's real world and real life. Acolyte went away from that a little bit. Acolyte was a different thing. I think there were some strong performances in that. I think the Kenobi show kind of straddled that line a little bit because you have Darth Vader who can branch both divides. But I think something like Andor that certainly does not involve the Force, that does not involve lightsabers and Jedi, forgive me, is the most gritty, realistic feeling of any of the Star Wars shows we've had. So I think that paints those acting performances in a different light. That's how I'm going to kind of come at this. I think there are plenty of things that you could go. I mean, I thought Baylan Skoll, I said this last week, was a revelation in Ahsoka, that character and what Ray Stevenson did and the way it was acted. But I could see somebody watching live action Ahsoka, who you're used to animated Ahsoka, and go, something doesn't feel right. The way the head tails move, the way there's a reason why these shows all hit differently. This one is very grounded in what we would call real world, as I do air quotes for an audio based format. So I think that in this, what Jeff is saying, and he's right, there are a million amazing performances and we don't have the time to go through and discuss and break down every single performance. But I think for me, it's the most grounded and real feeling of anything Star Wars we've gotten in a really long time.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it does definitely depend on the universe, right? I think the way the Filoni live action stuff is, it feels like it's popping off the page and popping off the screen from a Clone Wars episode or a Rebels episode, and that's fine. And I think the way I would put it is sort of a little bit more comic booky, right? It's a little bit more, your characters are, fully, full chest, whatever they are is what they are. But that's kind of also the way it's, the way it just has developed. And yeah, it is very hard to, put one up against the other. Nick, let me ask you this before we move on to the next question. If you got to give a best actor, best actress in this series, who are you giving it to?
All right. If I'm going to give a best actor, best actress, and this is the most favorite child question, maybe you've asked me on this show in a very long time. I think I have to go with, for actress, it's such a toss up.
Yeah.
I think I'm going with Bix for best actress. I felt, not that I felt personally, because I haven't been through the things that her character has been through in my life, obviously, but it was real. There was a sadness there. I've been watching season 1 and 2 with my wife, who is not a Star Wars fan. And when Bix was on, at some point, she said, and I know what she meant by, she said, I need her to stop doing the sad doe-eyed thing because it's bringing me down. Like, it's having an effect. It's weighing on her. So I think Bix would be, I'm not even going to name the others because I want you to have a chance to pick. So that would be my actress choice. I'm going to go a little bit outside the box for my male. There's so many good males, and obviously the ones that we all know are the ones we all know. So my underground sleeper is Brasso. I love Brasso. Yeah. I thought he did, and I think he did so much with not a lot of dialogue. There was a lot of presence, physical presence, which is something that doesn't always come through with every actor. There's a lot of acting in his eyes because, of course, he had that awesome big bushy beard, but there was heart. There was genuine. That was somebody you could count on. There was no question about it. From the first time we meet him, when Cassian owes him money, all the way through to when he meets his end on Mina Rao. I felt that one as much as I felt anybody else in the show. I thought Brasso was a fantastic character.
So you're giving it to Joplin Sibtain and Adria Arjona. So
absolutely. What about you?
There's so many, and they're almost all supporting actors. I got to go Genevieve O'Reilly just because of the amount of time she spent on screen. And what sold it for me, we talked about it in last week's episode, and I think we talked about it in multiple episodes, is I had totally forgotten that Mon Mothma hasn't seen any of the on the ground stuff. To her, the rebellion is all about a vision and principles and something to raise your flag to. She forgot. She hasn't really seen the action. And so as great as she was all along the way, when Cassian starts shooting people in front of her, her reaction, her response is great. It's perfect. And so I got to give it to Genevieve O'Reilly for Mon Mothma.
If it helps, she would have been my other choice. So and no surprise for this show and listeners of this show, we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Nick and Pete agreeing. Shocking. I'm going to go outside. Look, we all want to give it to Diego Luna. He did so great. There's no question about that. And honestly, what he definitely deserves credit for is being able to return to the character he had done 10 years ago and keep it the same, or go back before it was what we saw and grow the character. But I don't want to go that simple. So I'm going to go Kyle Soller, because I think Kyle Soller as what can I think of his character's name? Karn, Cyril Karn. He, I think of all the characters, had possibly the best growth arc, and he delivered it extremely well. The first couple, I mean, and our friend Stephen Kent last week even said it, if you can't hate that character, you can hate what he's about, you can hate what he did, you can hate where he started, but you have to feel sorry for him in a way. And when it was time for his character to turn, and again, I wasn't rooting for him to win, but I felt bad for how he got there and what he went through, and he portrayed that so well, because it was subtle. It wasn't an over the top. It wasn't a revelation. Oh my gosh, I'm fighting for the wrong team. It was just subtle enough so we knew that he made that turn, and he did what he was supposed to at the end, and that was to kind of side with the Gorman front. And yeah, we didn't want him beating the shit out of our friend Cassian Andor, but that was he had made the turn, and to do it again without a soliloquy that says I've seen the wrong side of the world and I'm fixing it. It was just really well done. So Kyle Soller gets it for me.
And I think something that can go right along with that, and that's another excellent choice. I made a whole list. I'm showing it to you again in an audio medium of all the names that, as I was listening to Jeff's question, jotting down who was great. Doing this rewatch of Andor 1 and 2 with my wife, getting into season 2, I didn't pay as much attention to this the first 3 times I watched those episodes. Yeah. But seeing it on this one, from the very beginning of when he gets to Gorman, he's not sure what the deal is. Like, he has that conversation where he says to his mother, he's like, Gorman's not a threat. He's having that phone call from his office in the bureau. And so from the very beginning, and we see that as it progresses with that character, from the very beginning, he's a little bit like, wait, what's going on here? Like, he's not bought in. And they planted those seeds really well to where, yes, he wanted to be a big deal. He wanted to not disappoint his mother. But at the same time, something didn't quite add up. And that plays out in a lot of subtle ways that I didn't catch the first few times.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. Yeah. I mean, again, every single person, there was not a bad performance anywhere. Not a single bad performance. All right. Well, let's move on to our next question. Our next question, there's been a fan of our show who has DM'd me just about every week during Andor. Somebody goes by the name of The Real Dodge, and I believe he's located in the UK, or she. I'm not even sure. They're located overseas in the UK, and so they sent me a message. And their question was, how did a leader and such a powerful figure as Luthen Rael remain so hidden from the rest of the rebellion throughout the entire saga? I know it's a paradox in that if more people knew about him, the greater the risk at the start, but he disappeared from history. Obviously, everyone who died in Rogue One, but Mon Mothma still knew of his impact. Will we get a Who Started the Rebellion show in the future, or is that beating the proverbial dead horse? I think it is beating the dead horse, but it is interesting to ask that question because, first of all, we saw, Nick, that the council didn't love Luthen Rael. They didn't love his approach. It worked, but they didn't love it. But, sort of as an undercover cop in a way, there was no way he could ever be revealed. And in his great monologue to Lonnie, he talked about how he's basically he admitted he's the unknown figure in this entire thing, and never will be known other than to, Mon Mothma is probably the last person who remembers him. We don't know what happened to Clea. We don't know what happened to Vel, but Mon Mothma's the only one who really knows what he did to get them to where they are. So, and I think Andor season 1 and 2 was the story of the early rebellion for sure. But anything to add to that, Nick?
So I have two thoughts that go along with this. The first one is, I think there's the possibility, because we see from the very beginning of all of this, it's about protecting those involved. We see everything Mon Mothma goes through in order to have her transactions hidden, to be able to not link it back to people because of safety. Bail Organa stays behind, all of that stuff. We don't know, you said it, we don't know what happens to Clea. I love, somebody posted a thing, they showed a shot of Empire Strikes Back in Hoth before they evacuate, and there's somebody in the background with an earpiece doing a radio something, and somebody said, I like to believe that this is Clea, farther on down the road, which, again, I love that. It's like Captain Rex in Return of the Jedi.
Yep.
But the bottom line is, we don't know what happened with Clea. We don't know where Clea ended up. So maybe this was a part of a way of protecting Clea, because she was the one most connected to Luthen.
That's a great point.
So we don't mention offering her the safety and security that everyone else needs as a part of this rebellion. What I will say is, and this is my own headcanon, once the rebellion is successful, for the short period of time, it seems like the rebellion was successful before the Forced Order and that kind of thing. We have something here in our real world at the CIA. We have the memorial wall with the stars. And these are people who have sacrificed for the CIA, but couldn't be named, but couldn't be associated for whatever reason. I like to believe there is some version of that within the New Republic, where even if nobody knew, Mon Mothma could walk by that, whatever the rebel signaled, the Starbird. Maybe there's a row of Starbirds on the wall that related to Cassian, Jyn, Luthen, Nemik, Tivik, Melshi, anybody who was involved in some of these things, the nameless Manny Bothans in Return of the Jedi for Death Star 2. Because, spoiler alert, friends who always complain about this, that's Death Star 2. That's not Death Star 1. Two different things. But that's how I've decided to build that in my mind, is maybe there's some sort of wall of unknown soldiers, unknown some things. We see it in Clone Wars. We see the clone soldier wall that they're standing in front of in season 7. That's how I've added that up. The other part of the question, who started the rebellion show in the future? I think this is it. I think this is who started the rebellion show. Everything that leads up to Star Wars 1977 is the who started the rebellion show. And then the rebellion continues from there. So I think that, of course, we'd love to mine this in a lot of different ways, and we might in books and comics in the future, but I think this is the one. This is the one that sets it all up. Well, we're going to move on to our next caller, and this is from our friend Brian Miller. Brian was just on the show a couple weeks back on ATG Live on Thursday nights. Free plug for us. Join us on Thursday nights live for ATG Live. We have guests. We have a fun game that, if you like sports and know the show Around the Horn, we call it Around the Galaxy, and it's how we talk about Star Wars news every week. Works the same way. Tons of fun. And there's a lot of ways to get you involved in the show itself. So here's a call from our friend Brian Miller.
Hey, Pete and Nick, this is Brian. So think about Andor and how great of a job Gilroy did in working with the scaffolding that he was presented, and then building more scaffolding on top of that, or to the sides of that. I'm wondering what each of your top 4 folks off of the Andor hub might be. What are 4 storylines, or what are 4 new series or new developments that you could see coming off of this that may not have been around if we did not have Andor? Saw is a possibility, but again, we knew that before Andor. What did Andor bring in terms of possible spinoffs, possible new scaffolding for the Star Wars universe? Thanks so much for what you guys do. I enjoy listening and watching. Take care.
That's a great question, Nick. Let's each take 2. If we were going to have 2 spin-off shows, or 4 total spin-off shows from Andor, which 4 would we want total?
All right. How about I'll do one, you do one, we'll alternate. We'll see what we come up with.
That works for me. Perfect.
All right. I want a backstory on Partagaz. I know Imperial things are not necessarily, the Imperials are the bad guys. That character was a great one. And I'm sure part of my affinity was I knew him from Game of Thrones as Qyburn. And he did such a good job. And again, not to reference my wife watching Andor for the first time, but he's been on the screen several times and she goes, he's really good at this. And I think that to get a Partagaz story, we know how it ends. And I don't think it has to be a prequel. We don't have to go way back to early stuff. Let's get the most recent few years, get him tied up in something with Tarkin, get him tied up with, a run-in with the Emperor or Vader or something along the lines in the Imperial bureaucracy with that actor doing that. That would be a lot of fun to me.
I love that because there were other things they were chasing down. The ISB wasn't just focused on the things that we saw. So it would actually be cool if we saw him going after another thing and having Tarkin warn him, if you screw this other thing up, it's over for you. And that way we know that's why he took the route he did at the end of the season.
Well, and something like that creates a neat little mechanism where if the pivot point is the Empire, okay, this story that the Empire is focused on is Cassian Andor, but if you pivot over to another place, maybe the pivot point is smuggling and Talon Karrde and Han Solo. You pivot to another point and the Empire is dealing with Wedge and Rogue Squadron and some other, like it's a way to kind of pivot from different points because they are putting and dealing with, as Nimick said, a bunch of different rebellions all around the galaxy. So you could bring in other characters that you know and are familiar with and let him be the focal point of having to deal with it.
That's cool. I like that a lot. I'm going to go sort of similar in that it's not necessarily a good guy show, and that is I'd like to see a show called the Rise and Fall of the Partisans, and I'd like to see sort of what it is. I mean, what's really cool about Saw Gerrera's story, the more I think about it, the more I think it's really incredible because it wasn't planned at all, and that is that his first rebellion on his home planet, he was trained by Obi-Wan and Anakin and Ahsoka. He trained his troops. They trained their partisans. So not necessarily that far back, but what is it that I think there's a lot of drama going on inside the ranks and a lot of fear of, almost Darth Vader level fear of Saw Gerrera himself, right? If you screw up your mission and you have to report to Saw, it's like apology accepted, Captain Nita. It is the same exact thing. So it might be kind of a cool thing to see some people who are doing it for the right reasons, but question the way they're sort of where they're put into it. And, again, it doesn't need to be the Saw Gerrera show, but it certainly could be about some of the things happening in the Partisans. And I think we can be pretty confident that the Partisans ended with Saw on Jeddah. And I think that was the last of their impact on the rebellion, but I think it would be a great and interesting show.
I agree with that. So for my second one, gosh, this is a tough way to try and figure out because you do have so many things. I think, what if we get, and again, this is kind of a location-based show. I don't know how many specifically. It's not a show called Corellia. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a show called Yavin. But what if we get a show based around, I feel like now I'm naming Star Wars MASH, but let's just go with it. Yavin, the base, we see it in Star Wars. This is where they are. This is where they end up. That's where we are at the end of the show. The camp, the inner workings. I've already talked about how I wanted to live in Cassian and Bix's treehouse on Yavin.
Yep.
But what if we get some sort of centralized show about the rebellion sending missions out, bringing missions back? You can jump to the mission, you can come back, but it's really about the structure of what Yavin is because you can be mission specific, but we also know, like so many other bases in Rebels and where they were in the beginning of season 1 with the Maya Pei folks, these bases aren't necessarily safe either. These are supposedly old ruins. There's wildlife. There's crazy creatures. It could be a little bit like Lost. It could be a little bit so maybe we get a Yavin show. Maybe we get, a little bit of time set on what happens out of this place in the lead up to Star Wars 1977, where it all comes to a head. I
love that. And like the series finale is what those people who we've gotten to know in Yavin are doing during the time of the Death Star attack. Are they panicking? Are they packing their stuff? Are they trying to get out? I think that
Bring in some folks like we did with Mon Mothma and Genevieve O'Reilly. Recast some folks like Biggs and Wedge and Porkins, the folks that are going to launch out of this base in 1977. Like you said, run it right up to what's about to happen. These guys in a Millennium Falcon show up. Who are they? This kid from a farm. Let's give him an X-Wing. Let's make a whole episode about how controversial it is. This teenager shows up and they're like, sure, jump in. You can be with our Air Force and go fight somebody. We don't know you, but sure.
And actually you could almost do it like a MASH, because MASH had that level of humor, and the bittersweetness of MASH was so good. Okay, so I like that. I think that's a win right there. I think that's really good. I like that a lot. Gosh, I think we've seen our friend Cam Ray is doing a comedy about Cyril and Dedra, the half-hour comedy. So I'm not going to go there. But I think that there's probably a decent spinoff. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do it as a Tales of. Similar to Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire, was it, and Tales of the Bounty Hunters, and I want to see Tales of the ISB. And again, it's similar to your Partagas thing, but it's 3 15-minute episodes of just intrigue and just sort of showing those inner workings. And it might be boring as a cartoon, but I don't know. I want to see more of the ISB. I think they were such a cool outlet and such a cool thing to watch. So
I want to see more of that room. As I said from the beginning, it's like the inside of Spaceship Earth at Disney World at Epcot. But also, you're not wrong, because of the character. There was a room full of people with stories. You had Lonnie, you had Hirt, you had Partagas, you had Dedra, you had the other guy, I can't think of his name. Every one of those people are a focal point. Every one of those has a pivot point into some aspect of what they were doing. And we get a lot more of the ISB farther down the line when we get to Mando with, what's his name? Giancarlo Esposito, his character. He's ISB, former ISB. And so there's a deep history in that organization that is going to continue to inform things farther down the line in the Star Wars galaxy. So I don't think you're as far off base on that as you might pretend to try to be.
I definitely want that Yavin show, though, for sure. So. Well, our next call is related, and it's Scott from Montgomery left us a message, so let's check that out.
Hi, guys. Good morning. Scott from Montgomery here. First time, long time. So now that Andor is over, many of us obviously are thinking about what's next. Naturally, my question for you two is, what would you like to see next? Is there a specific character or an era that you would like to see explored and featured in a series? Anyway, that's it. Thanks. I'll hang up and listen.
Well, since that's kind of similar to the last question, let's talk about Andor was a series that gave us background on another character. Who from the entire Star Wars gamut do you think that there, not just would you like to see, but do you think that there's enough history and an interesting enough story to do a 12 to 24 episode series similar to Andor?
Pete, that's a great question. And if we're going to get a backstory, let's get a Jedi backstory, because I want the Lor Santeca story. We get a tiny little bit of Lor Santeca at the beginning of The Force Awakens. Yep. He has the plans. He gives them to Poe, to give to BB-8, to hide, to get away. He has respect for Leia. And I love the line, General, to me, she's always going to be royalty, or however he says it. I already misquoted it. But I think he says to me, she's royalty. Either way, there's a story there. And that's a great, venerable actor. He's not going to be involved with it necessarily, but I'd love to know what that story is. I'm pretty sure that story has also been told in some books. So this is me telling on myself because I haven't read enough comics or novels.
Yeah, he's been in a couple of the comics, but I don't count those. Sorry, no.
Okay, that's right. If you're new to the show, we apologize. If you're not, Chris, we love you. That's not real. So let's do a Lor Santeca story. Let's build out where he came from, what got him to this point. It feels like a lot of what we're talking about is defined endpoints, which, let's be perfectly honest, for show creating and show writing stories, it's a great thing to have an endpoint that you can target and focus on. You don't start something, I don't know where we're going and I don't know how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
Let's pick something that has an endpoint. So maybe we tell a story about Lor Santeca over the years that leads up to how he comes across the location of Luke Skywalker and how he's going to pass that along to to Poe and BB-8 as a part of what the sequel trilogy becomes.
I love that. And I'm going to take a similar route in that, again, there's probably a lot of information out there. It probably exists, but, just like Tony Gilroy said, I don't care about the story that was written for K2SO. This is his origin story. Right. I would love to see the story of Biggs Darklighter with a tip of the hat to Star Wars Explained and Alex Damon, who I know is a huge fan. But I think there's a story there, again, a confined story, a story you can do in 12 to 24 episodes of how he left Tatooine, joined the Empire, and remember he says in the cutscene, or I think it's on the cutscene, or maybe it was actually in the movie, I can't remember, where he's leaving, he's going to be leaving the Empire, he's leaving the Empire on a ship, and he's going to join the rebellion. Let's see that story of somebody joining the rebellion from the Empire at the height of the Empire, as would be the case for Biggs. So yeah, I mean, I'll take either one of those, Biggs or Lor Santeca. I think that would be great.
Our next question, Pete, was on Blue Sky, one of the social medias we are on at the SSW Network. You can find us there anytime you want to on Blue Sky, and it came from our good friend Jordan. And Jordan asks, after watching Andor, does it change the way you see Rogue One? I know I have an answer to this, and you and I talk all the time, so I know you have an answer to this as well. But Pete, how does Rogue One hit for you in light of Andor's 2 seasons?
Yeah, I think everybody who's watched Andor will look at Rogue One a little bit differently. But the way I see it now is not as its own story. I see it as a continuation of the Andor story. I see it as episodes 13, 14, and 15, or series episodes 1, 2, and 3 of season 3. I just think it's such an amazing direct continuation. It is almost like they planned to do it this way, and I know they obviously didn't. This all came from John Knoll saying, hey, let's do a movie about the guys that are mentioned in the opening crawl. And now we've gotten this really rich backstory about the rebellion. So to me, it changes it in that it doesn't feel like a standalone movie anymore. It always felt like a direct lead in, a very well done direct lead in to A New Hope. But now it feels like an extension of what this full story is.
I think for me, it is 100% just, I don't know if it makes me look at it differently. I think it makes me appreciate it more. We got the movie, and it was a great movie from the beginning. It was a war movie. We talked a lot about, it's a war movie. It's an espionage movie. It's spies. It's a lot of these things. It was very un-Star Warsy in a lot of ways, the same way the Andor show has been, except for, Darth Vader for 45 seconds at the end. But what we get in this is something that when it first came out, we're like, holy crap, that's good.
Right.
And these are characters, and these are all new characters other than Tarkin and Darth Vader. But now we know, Cassian was great. Jen is now kind of the outlier. Jen is the one that we're like, okay, she's here. We don't know all of her story. We get her as a little kid in the beginning. We get all that. But we're invested in Cassian Andor 100%. Yeah. We were invested in Mon Mothma because of Rebels and the rest of Star Wars and some of that. But we're super invested in Mon Mothma now.
Yeah.
It's a different thing. So I think for me, it adds layers to what Rogue One was. It's it's not an onion where you're peeling away the layers, you're adding to them. So I guess this is like rock formations over histories and times. We're just adding layers. We're building it up. So it built Rogue One up for me. I've always loved Rogue One. There's never a moment where I went, I'm on the fence about this one.
Yeah.
But now I look at it and I see little things, like I see Melshi, and I think about him in the Narkina arc, and I see these little bit Draven along the way, and I'm like, oh yeah, Draven. There's more Draven in here.
Draven's a pain in the ass.
He was a pain in the ass the whole time, but we didn't know it because all we had was the movie. So I think for me, what it does, Jordan, and to answer your question is, yes, it adds to it, not necessarily adding new knowledge, but just strengthening the love and appreciation that I have for Rogue One.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, look, if we're going to sort of fantasize about Rogue One being season 3 of Andor, I think you would start. Tell me if you think this is a good way to go. I would start with a 3-episode arc about Jyn and Galen Erso as a 3-episode flashback, because we did see some of what was Galen's wife's name? I can't remember, but we saw her on Coruscant. Lyra, right. Yep. Risen from the dead. It's a miracle.
Oh, look, it's Lyra, risen from the dead.
But we have seen scenes of Lyra and Galen in Coruscant with baby Jyn, and I think that's the way I would do it. I'd do a 3-episode arc about that, something that leads to his escape, and then we got to get more about Bodhi Rook and his escape from the Empire, and how Galen gave him that message. And then you get, 3 episodes, which is essentially Rogue One. So,
yes, both of those completely work.
That's the way I would do it. All right, well, we have another voicemail question, and this one comes from Eric, and he has a question about a logic gap that has been created from Andor to Rogue One. So let's hear what he's got to say.
Hey, Pete. This is Eric, long-time listener, first-time caller. I have a question about Rogue One. After watching season 2 of Andor, of course, I had to rewatch Rogue One again, and there was a bit of a logic gap that I was hoping you could clarify. I was wondering why Mon Mothma tells Jyn the Alliance won't pursue Jin's lead to go to Scarif, and so Jyn goes to Scarif with Cassian and some rebel volunteers. And then 18 minutes later, the rebels on Yavin detect some Imperial radio chatter about something happening on Yavin, and then they decide now is the time to send out a serious contingent of the rebel fleet. So what changed in their mind from their initial refusal? It felt like it was out of nowhere just to serve the purpose of the movie. So I was wondering if you had details as to why that happened that wasn't really apparent on screen. Thanks a lot.
It's a good question. I think there's different ways to kind of rectify that. I think to me, a bigger part of that question is, how did they had this whole room of people who were like, we're not going after this Death Star thing. We need more proof. And now after watching Andor, the way I would use the logic gap is they have a different trust in Cassian. And I think if Cassian felt it was worth the pursuit, then maybe the rest of, or at least Mon Mothma and Admiral Raddus and some other people might have said, look, he's been a little bit rash in the past, but it's always turned out to be something for a reason. So maybe they believe in Cassian for the first time. I'm not sure. What are your thoughts, Nick?
I think that totally works. I also think that part of what we're looking at is the catchphrase that starts in Rogue One that we get in Andor: rebellions are built on hope. And I think exactly what you're saying is Cassian has a little bit of cachet. He's built up a little bit of trust. He's built up a little bit of whatever's going on. And I think so in that moment when there's pressure and they're arguing and they're in that room and we're not going, they're on their own. But then somebody prevails and some voice goes, you know what? We have to try. The tiniest, we get it in Last Jedi, the spark that'll burn down the First Order. It's the spark that will burn down the Empire. You have to take shots. And I think in something like this that we have seen throughout both of these seasons, when you have different groups of rebellion happening all over the place, it's not going to be formalized. It's not going to be neat. It's not going to follow an exact formula. Sometimes you have to take gambles and risks. And you see that in war. If you study the American Civil War, if you study the Revolutionary War, there were times when unorganized groups went, let's take a crack at something. And sometimes it worked. Sometimes it worked big time. And like, holy crap. We've seen some of that kind of stuff in modern, just in the last 24 hours. But I think what happens is at some point, somebody in leadership like Mon Mothma steps up and says, we have to go. And she's willing to put her reputation on the line to say, I believe in this person. It may be a small group. You don't know him, but I do. So I'm willing to step up and say, let's go get his back. And so for me, it's the hopefulness of it that drives that decision.
Yep. And I'm going to add another sort of layer to that. And there is one line from Andor where when Cassian is coming back in on the U-Wing and Radish says, you're lucky Merrick wasn't here or he'd be already up there taking him down or something like that. I think Merrick was probably with Mon Mothma and just itching to go. I think he's kind of the sort of the space cowboy, the kind of, let's take action kind of person. And between him and Mon Mothma and a renewed trust in whatever Cassian's doing, might have been the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak.
So our final question, Pete, comes from our good friend Matt in Enid, Oklahoma. Let's hear what Matt has to say.
Hey, fellas, this is Matthew in Enid. Hey, I thought I'd leave you a message for your final Road to Rebellion recap podcast whenever you decide to record it, because there's been something bothering me for the last week. So one of the same guys that was complaining about Rogue One being tainted now because of Andor, also said originally that he wasn't going to watch the final 3 episodes of Rogue One of Andor because he already knows how Rogue One ends. So think about that for a minute. That's a special kind of stupid. I don't know. That's just bugs me. But anyway, I'm back to go bake an apple pie for my son. That's random, I know. But anyway, have fun, guys. Carry on. Take it easy. Bye.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah. There are people who are going to complain about everything, no matter what. One of the points there that's really interesting, and I think it's a common Star Wars Disney era television show thing, and that is, do we need this show because we know what happens, right? And that's like saying, did we need Rogue One because we know none of those people were going to survive? Did we need the prequels because we knew what happened there? Did we need any of these things? So it's an interesting thing, but I have to admit, when I heard that the Andor series was coming out, Nick, I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, that should be interesting. I don't know what else I need to know about that guy. I was wrong as you could be, but it was it definitely was something that I was like, it's like the Kenobi show. It's like, yeah, he sat in the desert all 20 years. Well, nope, he didn't, but that's cool. Let's see that story. So what are your thoughts on that?
So here's my thing. It's not a matter of I didn't need to watch it because I know how it ends. It was I needed to watch it because I know how it ends. Like, that's why I wanted to watch it. How did we get here? That's the whole question that this is answering. And that's the whole thing that John Knoll came up with, all that time ago was, hey, what is this story? And there's so many things that you can do that with. And there's people ask the same question about Han Solo. We know where Han Solo ended up, what Han Solo did, but guess what? We said, hey, we want to have a Han Solo movie. So we made a Han Solo movie. That's what storytelling is. What is this story? Well, if it's not there, you can make it up. If it is there, you don't have to make it up. Somebody else made it up for you. The reason I wanted to watch this show is because I saw Rogue One and thought it was fantastic and thought, great, let's flesh this out. Let's go to some other places. Let's learn about more of the history of the Empire. So what I'm going to say for Matt and for whoever he saw that said it and stated it that way is it's not that they weren't going to watch it because they knew how it was going to end. That's what compelled me to watch it, is I knew how it was going to end. That's what I wanted to know. How did we get there?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's probably the most important lesson that I've learned from Star Wars over the last couple of years. I mean, even you go back 20 years to the prequels, is you can definitely walk in and say, yeah, I know how this happens. Oh, Anakin Skywalker is going to turn into Darth Vader. Oh, okay, that's not a big deal. I figured this out. But it's such a compelling story to watch what happens. I don't need to watch the Clone Wars cartoon because I saw Revenge of the Sith, so I know what's going to happen there too. Now, but the story, the 7 seasons of story and the new characters and the people and I think that's the great thing about this Star Wars universe is we always say, it's about the background characters. That's where we made up our action figure stories when we were kids. And it is the background characters. Yes, you got Luke, Leia, and Han and Vader. And those are the big 4. Those are the main characters. But it's an entire galaxy, which is dirty and rugged and has people living their day to day. And how does a big giant galactic rebellion impact them? And that's those are the stories. And I think I'm learning more and more that those are the stories that I want. I want those in a way not more than, probably as much as I want some of the bigger galactic impact stories.
Agreed. And I think the other place that we saw that in the last couple of years was in Bad Batch. We saw a lot of the Registration Act, where they had to get chain codes, and we saw the beginning of that, which was a seed planted in the Mandalorian. We got Cut and Sue, former stormtroopers or clone troopers who were off living, trying to figure out what life was going to be like post being, a soldier, and all these kinds of things. So we've gotten this along the way in a lot of different ways, but this is a very specific way that we got it. And I think it only serves to enrich all these other stories that we have gotten.
And I really hope that this isn't the last of this kind of prestige TV that we're going to get in the Star Wars universe. Again, just because you like Andor doesn't mean you can't also like Ahsoka. Doesn't mean you can't also love Grogu and The Stranger. So there's so much Star Wars to take in. There's so much to enjoy, and there's so much that means you don't have to love all of it. And I think, Andor struck a chord with so many people, and that's amazing. And I do hope that we get some more serious Star Wars, and I also want some more goofy Star Wars. Bring me that. And I think we're going to get
as Chris Ryan says, gimme.
Yep. Well, that's going to wrap it up for our final episode of Road to Rebellion, the Andor After Show. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey as we've broken down Andor Season 2. We have had so much fun sharing it with you.
We really have, and we want to make sure that you keep up with everything we've got going on. So please make sure you're subscribed here to the Around the Galaxy podcast, wherever you get podcasts, because the content is not going to stop just with Road to Rebellion. We do special interviews, guests, as well as dropping weekly audio replays of our Thursday night live stream, which is called ATG Live.
Or see what I did there? You can join us. I know it was very bad. I apologize. I had to wait 7 episodes to throw that in. You can join us live every Thursday night on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@the SSW Network for all the Star Wars news of the week, celebrity interviews, and your calls and chats.
And if you like what we do, we would love for you to take the opportunity to go over to patreon.com/the SSW Network. Become a Patreon for as little as $3 a month. You're going to get early access, exclusive content, swag sent out, and a chance to be a part of what I firmly believe to be the best Star Wars community that's out there.
I agree. And of course, if you like today's show, leave us a 5-star review, share it with your Star Wars friends, and tell us what you thought of Andor or any Star Wars that you've been enjoying. You can find us on all the socials at the SSW Network. And remember, you can always leave us a voicemail, not just for this show. It may show up on other Around the Galaxy episodes or ATG Live. Call us at 504-321-1501. That's 504-321-1501. We absolutely want to hear from you.
That's it for this week. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And until next time, may the Force be with you.
And this has been Road to Rebellion. Road to Rebellion is copyright 2025 Pete in the Seat Studios. For more information on this show and other shows in the SSW Network, please head over to the SSWnetwork.com. Audio clips are copyright 2025 Lucasfilm.